something that I, in different spaces I can engage in different ways and languages, but I celebrate the femininity, right? I celebrate the feminists. So it's not so much, part of it is redefining maleness, and I think you were on point in which you were saying, yes, the woman talks about proliferation, and we just start to go into these gendered roles, and then that's what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman. But with queerness, you don't have to worry about that as much because you can just live, right? Even though you have to also live and protect yourself because you might get jumped or your ass kicked in the neighborhood, right? But you are working to play with liberation. So I think that's, one thing is just, being able to not have to recognize your identities, but also be able to play with it and what that means, which I think is just the queerest thing you could do.
I think something that both the film and Tony kind of talked about was privilege and this entitlement that I think is part of the masculine identity, and the film talked about the loss of that sense of privilege and how distressing that is. And I think as we move toward examining privilege and kind of deconstructing gendered privilege, that crisis is going to happen, and it is happening, and we see it a lot. And I think kind of learning how to address that crisis and how to be compassionate, but also be aware that the deconstruction of privilege is ultimately a very beneficial thing for the rest of the world, is going to be part of the struggle of de-gendering our society. And I think de-gendering our society is going to take a lot of time and a lot of work, and it's very uncomfortable because gender is so built into our society, and concepts of heteronormativity and the privilege of cisgendered people is so inherent in our social conditioning from the time we're babies. So, it's brave work and it's long-term work. And I think panels like this and movies like this and all the work these wonderful people are doing is such a good step in the right direction.
I think you hit on a couple of great points. One of the things that we do in the Becoming a Man Program, we have these values. It's a value-based curriculum. One of our values is respect for womanhood. When we get into the nitty-gritty of this value, it's really about helping men to understand their roles and pressures. So when we talk about privilege, if I'm to look at sexual oppression, it's not about what I do for a woman. It's about me liberating my own mind and saying, what's my fear? How do I benefit? What's the risk of me losing my privilege? And then in doing that, women have the space. So when we talk about feminism, for me, feminism is about me not trying to define what femininity is about or what women can do that for themselves. People can define who they are for themselves. It's when we start to superimpose our beliefs, even if we believe them ourselves. So when we talk about heterosexism, all these isms, it's about me looking at my privilege and saying, what are my fears? What is it that I need to do in terms of my work? And so if I'm doing that, if I'm looking at how I'm perpetuating the system, how I'm benefiting the system, now what I'm doing is I'm taking an implicit stand, but an explicit stand because it changes my behaviors. When we talk about the rape culture, it's about the access to non-disclosure. So, we've had sports people in Chicago who've been accused of things and they continue to play, and there's a value in that. There is, the economics and the game and these things are more important than protecting this woman's safety. And so, to the extent that I still support that sports team or I don't say anything, this is what I can do.
Well, we've reached the end of our time here. I encourage all of you to please continue the conversation and keep the dialogue open, especially with your families. 1 second, sorry. Just want a couple of quick closing remarks. There are Talk It Out toolkits still available at the resource table, so please go out and grab one of those. Also, if you're looking to continue the dialogue, if you're a social media person, unlike me, You can use something called Twitter, I guess, and go to hashtag Talk It Out or hashtag Mask You Live In. We encourage you to use the masks and outlines that you've been given and use it in your families. We hope that this is, if you start these conversations on a local and individual level, we'll have a much better chance of creating a community and cultural shift. And so on behalf of our host committee, Apnagar, Rape Victim Advocates, Siragusa Foundation, and the Chicago Foundation for Women, and Women United Giving Council, we thank you all for coming.